Right now, we tilt to Washington, D.C. Congressman Andy Ogles joins us on the Matt Murphy hotline to talk about activity going on there, to include the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Andy, good afternoon. Hope you're well.
Absolutely. Obviously, our prayers go out to the family. That shooting is horrible, and obviously, hopefully, at this point, justice can be done. But that never is, that doesn't replace a life that's been lost.
Well, no, and we certainly need to look on the state level into shoring up some of our involuntary incarceration laws that would put these people in a mental health facility if they are deemed not able to stand trial. And this guy slipped through the cracks. It's just a bad situation all the way around. Yeah. Speaking of bad situations, Andy, obviously a horrible situation for the Israeli people in the aftermath of the October 7th terrorist attack against them. I so appreciate you taking a stand along with several of your members in the House of Representatives against the leadership of Hamas. It seems that many in mainstream media have forgotten that Hamas is not just a terrorist organization, but they are also the leaders, quote unquote, if you will, of Gaza. They are the political leaders, although they don't live in Gaza. Talk to us a little bit about what you're doing about it.
Yeah, so we've had, or I've had, along with some of my colleagues, a multi kind of pronged approach at protecting our homeland from, quite frankly, a Palestinian invasion by way of asylum and visas and so forth. So we've had the Gaza Act to prevent the Palestinians from coming here. We've got a bill that protects, the secretary from giving them a temporary protected status. We have a bill that is prohibiting money going to Hamas in the form of quote unquote aid, because we know it's not getting there. Then we just sent a letter to Qatar ambassador saying, look, if you're truly our ally, which they have special ally status, is you shouldn't be harboring known terrorists in your countries. With these guys, they're worth several $1 billion. So you have these billionaires living in Qatar, or Qatar, as you would say in Arabic, and they're directing, these attacks on the Israelis and trying to get people into our own country, and they're sheltered by someone who's supposed to be our ally. Well, if you're ally, it's time for you to act like it. It's time for you to kick those people out of your country so they can be, stand trial for the terrorist attack on the Israeli homeland. And so that's what we're trying to do by going on offense, because if we allow these people into our country, that puts us at risk. And it should be noted that Jordan does not want the Palestinian people. Egypt does not want the Palestinian people. The Kuwaitis a few years ago, deported large numbers of Palestinians because they are a radicalized people. And so obviously our prayers continue to be with the people of Israel, and quite frankly, into Blinken, who's saying that, the Israeli government has no right for long-term occupation of Gaza. That's not for us to say. That's for the Israeli people and the Israeli government to say, and it's time that this administration stop meddling in Israeli foreign policy.
Well, I applaud you and your colleagues in the House recognizing that Hamas leadership is the central problem in that arena, not Israeli leadership, obviously, and the Israelis are reacting, not acting in an aggressive fashion in that region. Hamas leadership are the ones that are acting, and I appreciate you laying the blame and pointing the finger at Qatar. I mean, They need to bear some responsibility in harboring what we consider to be a terrorist organization. How is that? I mean, I know I'm asking the wrong person here, Andy, because you're fighting the good fight now, but how has this been going on for so long that Qatar's our friends? We consider them a, quote, key U.S. ally, yet we allow them to allow Hamas leadership, a terrorist organization, to live this lavish lifestyle in their country.
Well, so we have a forward operating base in Qatar, and so our government has kind of looked the other way when, on frequent occasion, Qatar has been a bad actor where they've undermined us. They've quite frankly, indirectly or at times directly, facilitated terrorism around the world. And so it's time for us to call them out for what they are. Yes, they're a strategic partner, but if you're going to be an ally, if you're going to have that kind of special status for the United States of America, we need you to act like it 24/7. And we recognize that you live in a bad neighborhood. Okay, I get it. But at the same token, you have known terrorists living within your borders who are actively pursuing killing our true ally, Israel, and the atrocities that were committed, things that we can't really talk about on air, what they did to women, what they did to children, and what they did to babies. You would get censored probably get fined if we talked about it in great detail. And yet here they are, they're allowed to live, allowed to operate, they're allowed to have their Lamborghinis and their fancy cars and to fly on private jets, and they move around with impunity, and we know where they're at, we know where they live. And again, we need our ally to send a signal to terrorists in that region that it will not be tolerated. Look, we can have differences of faith. We can have differences of opinion. We can disagree over borders and such. But when you're harboring terrorists that are literally day in and day out trying to kill Israelis, trying to kill Europeans, and trying to kill Americans, we need to call a spade a spade. And that's what I did with my letter to the ambassador. That's what I've been doing, because most of these if you will, Hamas pieces of legislation I have authored and sponsored, and rallied my colleagues to come on board with me. And so it's an honor to serve the 5th District, but this is a serious situation. We've caught almost 1,000 people from Iran and Syria trying to come into our country. You've had people with this current administration testify before committee over the last 2 weeks saying we have known terror cells operating in the United States, that there have been assassination attempts on U.S. soil here, targeting Americans. And so we've got to go on offense. We've got to get rid of these people. We've got to get them out of our country, and we've got to stop them from coming here.
So where is the bill now, and do you expect that it will get to the floor of the House?
Well, in the short term, because of the appropriations process, no, but that is something that we're going to advocate for as we continue to move forward.
Right.
So part of this is you put it up there, you have the conversations, you force the conversations, quite frankly, and hopefully in doing so, even if we can't get these bills passed in formal form, if you will, we can move the administration, because you have the House of Representatives and our colleagues in the Senate saying, look, if you don't take action, if you don't correct course, we're going to do it on your behalf. And so hopefully we continue to move the needle, point this out to the administration, and let them know, quite frankly, that we're not going to tolerate it. We do have funding mechanisms that we're going to be, debating over the next couple of months. We'll have a short-term continuing resolution that will get us through Christmas, but then we still have to fund the rest of the year. And so that's when we'll have the true opportunity to force the hand of the Biden administration.
Oftentimes the devil's in the details as to what happens in Washington, D.C., and I had to remind our listening audience of that last week when Rashida Tlaib escaped censure based on some of the language involved in the Marjorie Taylor Greene effort to censure Representative Tlaib. Last night, the House of Representatives did, in fact, censure Representative Tlaib in a vote of 234 to 188. I just wanted you an opportunity to offer your thoughts on why that was an important measure for the House of Representatives, considering some of her incendiary language.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I believe in free speech, of course, but when your speech as a member of Congress is calling for violence and it's calling for the elimination of the people of Israel and the state of Israel, that's a step way too far. You can't yell fire in the theater in the same way you can't say the things that she's been saying. I did vote for Marjorie Taylor Greene's censure resolution. It was not worded in a way that quite frankly was ideal, so it ultimately failed on the House floor. A good friend of mine, Rich McCormick out of Georgia, took that censure resolution, quite frankly, worked with the parliamentarian, the intel, worked with the Freedom Caucus. We drafted it in a way that would be very careful with the language so that we weren't guilty of making accusations on the House floor that we couldn't prove. And because of that, because it was thoughtfully drafted, and kudos to my buddy, McCormick, that we were able to get it passed. We worked together, and the rest is history. But again, if you or I were to make similar comments in the public space, we would be condemned. But because she's a Democrat and she's one of the squad, she gets away with more than she should. So this was an important step to say, look, yes, freedom of speech, but you went way, way too far. And again, I go back to the Israeli people have a right to choose their destiny. You've got to remember, back in the early 2000s, there was a land for peace deal with the Palestinians. Well, guess what? 20 years later, we don't have peace. The Israelis live under day in and day out threat of attacks from the Gaza Strip. And that obviously culminated into this terrorist attack that took place just a few short weeks ago. And so now what happens next is because of the Palestinian government. It's because of Hamas. They have brought this down on themselves, and it's time for them to pay the price.
Congressman Andy Ogles, thank you, as always, for spending a bit of time with us, describing in detail your activities in Washington, D.C., and the broader picture up there. We appreciate you. Come see us when you're home, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks, buddy.
Necessary.